It's Thursday, and we got a game against the Cowboys and the Giants. We're going to cover the must-starts, the sneaky starts, the guys we don't want to start from this matchup. And to a lot of people, when this video comes out, it signals to them that Week 4 is almost here. It's time to look at their lineups, and it is. It is time to get ready for Week 4. Today, we're going to be looking at these players. We're going to look at the matchup. We're going to look at how these fantasy points could be scored in tonight's game. But before we dig in, you need to click that subscribe button right now, because we're talking about these players every day. We talk about the waiver wire every day. Even on the weekend, we do deep dives on players, and we use these videos to help you set your lineups. Click that button. Stop missing out. But we got a big game today. 45 over-under set by Vegas with a deep spread of 6. That's interesting right there. I figured it'd be a little tighter considering what we've seen from the Cowboys as of late. But we got a 45 over-under. You're looking right under me, and you're seeing these games, especially the last two, hit on fantasy points. 40-0 really, but the Cowboys scoring a lot there. And the one before that, 48 total points. That being said, we might be able to see a matchup here where points are being scored and maybe some good fantasy production from damn near everybody. And both teams are able to rush for over 100 yards per game in these last 3 games. And both teams over 30 passing attempts. That is something you want to see. And the Giants lacking in the passing yards, but they got this guy named Malik Nabers who can really turn things around in that department. And the Cowboys pushing 300 yards per game for this. But we go look at the quarterbacks here. Easy plays in 1 QB fantasy football. Dak Prescott, you're probably starting. You probably drafted him in the middle rounds, and you're like, I'm good to go. I'm rocking him almost every week. Now you're looking at Danny Dimes. You might be thinking about him in DFS. More than likely, you're not starting him unless you're playing the matchups, and you're looking at this matchup, and you're like, I'm good to go. With a 45 over-under, with both teams traditionally scoring in this matchup, usually more on the Cowboys side as of late, you may want to think about it. But more than likely in your traditional 1 QB leagues for fantasy football, you got somebody else that you're more excited to start. So you're probably not starting Daniel Jones. But again, you're probably starting him if you're streaming, if you're hurting, or if you're looking at him in daily fantasy football. I think this could be a sneaky bet for daily fantasy football for Daniel Jones. And we're going to the Giants side here. Devin Singletary is in a nice matchup for him. And a lot of people are going to like Devin Singletary this week. And a lot of people are going to be talking him up because the Cowboys, they have been a gaping hole against the run. Alvin Kamara put up 44 PPR fantasy points. Derrick Henry put up 30.4. Week 1, Jerome Ford, 18.9. So he's at least probably going to get you a 10 spot today. He's at least probably going to get you a 10 spot. As long as he's healthy throughout the whole game, nothing happens, he's at least probably going to get you a 10 spot. He's averaging 4.7 yards per carry. Actually, one of the most efficient running backs in the National Football League right now per yards after contact. 197 yards on the ground in 3 games, 42 rush attempts, getting a 56% share of the team's attempts out of the backfield. And the Cowboys are allowing 63.6 more than league average when it comes to allowing fantasy points to running backs. They're averaging 36.5 PPR fantasy points per game. However, that's kind of skewed. Kamara and Derrick Henry, those are 2 different running backs. That's kind of skewed. This is a small sample of 3 games, remember. That being said, the upside's there. I at least see a 10 spot here. I see him hitting double digits fairly easily in this matchup. I look for him to get some good numbers. Tyrone Tracy is a dark horse for the long term, a guy you need to pay attention to. He's starting to get more work. He's very explosive. Maybe you throw a couple chips out for daily fantasy football. I do not suggest starting for traditional redraft, but maybe you mess around in some of your DFS lineups, depending on how many you're playing in. I'm not talking cash games. I'm talking big tournaments. Maybe you mess around with that. And this is your indicator that you need to be looking at him more off the waiver wire when guys get more buzz for DFS. Like, hey, maybe you should throw him in lineups because Tyrone Tracy's got some juice, starting to see more touches. Something happens to Singletary. He's going to be getting some work. Now we're looking at the wide receivers. It's the Malik Nabers show. And it doesn't matter the matchup. he's up there in that Justin Jefferson category for me. I'm starting him every game. I'm not questioning it. I said it last week. I said it the week prior. And you just got to move quickly with these types of players. And these players move quickly when they start to hit. Just like Justin Jefferson. It took him 3 weeks before we knew he was Justin Jefferson. We already know Malik Nabers is Malik Nabers. It ain't hiding. It ain't hiding. He's got 37 targets on the season. Caught 23 balls, 271 yards. And the Cowboys are good against wide receivers. But look at the trend here of the wide receivers that hit against them. Rashad Bateman, Rashid Shaheed, and Jerry Jeudy. All these guys have deep average depth of targets. So the wide receivers on the Giants are the ones that's going to be pushing it downfield. Malik Nabers gets a good average depth of target. He should be good to go. But looking at a guy like Jalen Hyatt, maybe being a surprise play in this matchup, maybe if you want to be a little frisky in your DFS lineup, maybe not in traditional redraft league, that's not a start. Wan'Dale Robinson getting targets. 2 games with a good significant amount of targets on the season. Week 2, he only had 4, but that's because Malik Nabers soaked them all up with 18. That being said, the Cowboys are allowing deep shots. Rashad Bateman, Shaheed, Jeudy, all with deep ball capabilities, all getting a deep average depth of target. You're going to be seeing that with these wide receivers on the Giants. Wan'Dale Robinson will probably suck up targets underneath like always, but Malik Nabers should be doing well. You're looking at Theo Johnson at tight end for the Giants, and if you're starting him in your traditional redraft league, you're hurting, and I would not suggest that, only if you're trying to be contrarian in a deep tournament for DFS, but I don't suggest that either. But if you're being contrarian, you're being contrarian. That's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. The Cowboys are good against the tight end, but again, everybody's kind of good against the tight end. And the thing is, tight end's kind of tight end. So if he catches one in the end zone, then he'll score. That's about it. And if he does score a touchdown, he's going to be like a top 10 tight end in fantasy for the week. On to the Cowboys. On to the run game here. And the Giants are about league average when it comes to allowing fantasy points to running backs. They're allowing over 10 fantasy points per game to the running backs here. When you're looking at Jerome Ford, 10 spot. Brian Robinson, 14. Austin Eckler to score well against them as well. Aaron Jones, 18.9. And the thing is, though, they get in weird game scripts. And this game script could be weird. And Rico Dowdle is leading Ezekiel Elliott by a nut hair when it comes to touches out of the backfield. Both of them not really that efficient. 3.8 yards per carry for Dowdle, 3.3 for Ezekiel Elliott. You may be thinking about starting Dowdle, especially if you're hurting at running back. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. He will be getting opportunities in this matchup. This should be the matchup where one of these guys do score the touchdown. They're splitting the workload. Almost 50-50. Dowdle's getting a little bit more. But again, that touchdown is going to be very impactful. I think this is the game where the Cowboys do decent on the run. They don't go over the moon. That might equate to fantasy points. You don't know which running back's going to get it. That touchdown is going to be very impactful in this matchup. Now looking at the wide receivers, CeeDee Lamb's always going to be the must start. We don't really need to look at him. You're starting him every matchup, even if he loses a leg or an arm. Jalen Tolbert's been getting deep balls and more targets. That opportunity could leak into this matchup, especially if the game script breaks. There's a chance that the game script breaks. We're hoping it does, so we get more fantasy points, and it has broken one way or another in the last 3 matchups with good scoring. Jalen Tolbert could be coming on in the nightcap here tonight and be getting something down the line. You're paying attention to him. He's getting a fair amount of targets in his last few games, and he's getting a good ADOT. Brandin Cooks has slowed down since week 1, but he's going to be on the field. He's going to be doing some things. This could be a game where he gets right. He has been a little cold, and the Giants will allow fantasy points to wide receivers. Amari Cooper went off on them just a few days ago. Justin Jefferson is Justin Jefferson. He went off. Noah Brown for the Washington Commanders was the leading receiver in their matchup. They're averaging 31.9 PPR fantasy points to wide receivers, right around the league average. Look for CeeDee Lamb to have a good game because it looks like alpha wide receivers are having good games against the Giants. But I could see one of these wide receivers between Tolbert and Cooks landing in the end zone, especially if the game script is pushed. Now we're looking at tight end. Of course, we're looking at Jake Ferguson. He's played in 2 games and has seen 17 targets. The workload's going his way. The Giants are okay at guarding the tight end for fantasy production, but I don't think it matters when you're seeing the sheer volume. Look for Jake Ferguson to get volume. Look for him to get targets. More than likely, you're starting him unless you were a knucklehead and you drafted too many good tight ends and now you're clogged at tight end on your roster, but he's getting a 21% target share. That's a leap for the tight end spot. That's top tier. He's getting volume. And again, we look at the volume, we look at the workload, and then after that, the fantasy points just lay where they lay. That just happen. You just let the chips roll. Again, you want the workload, you got it here. You got a good ADOT for a tight end. You got good volume with Jake Ferguson. He's a good bet every single week due to the amount of targets he gets. But this week's Thursday night game should be hot with fantasy scoring. I'm excited to watch it. I do not see this being a slow scoring game at all. I look for there to be a lot of volume in this game. I look for the wide receivers to hit. I look for the running backs to do a little bit something. I look for Devin Singletary to be doing a little bit something in this matchup. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. Thank you for watching. Catch you on the next video.